non durables et illégaux, mettant en péril non seulement leur survie, mais aussi l'équilibre des écosystèmes. La perte des forêts participe à 1/6 des émissions annuelles de CO2, une cause majeure du changement climatique. Le projet pionnier de la CITES sur les espèces d'arbres, financé par l'Union européenne et l'Allemagne au travers de l'Initiative internationale pour le climat, est chargé d'une mission cruciale consistant à associer la gouvernance forestière au commerce durable afin de freiner la déforestation et de lutter contre le changement climatique. Cette initiative renforce les capacités des pays à gérer durablement leurs ressources forestières en s'assurant que le commerce international d'espèces d'arbres soutient les efforts en matière de conservation plutôt que d'île. Axé sur les avis d'acquisition légale et les avis de commerce non préjudiciables, notre travail permet de garantir que les arbres inscrits aux annexes de la CITES font l'objet d'un commerce durable et légal, préservant ainsi nos forêts pour les futures générations. Favorisant le renforcement des liens entre la gestion durable des forêts et les réglementations commerciales, ce projet offre une véritable lueur d'espoir. Il incarne l'engagement de la CITES à faire converger la conservation des espèces avec la gouvernance durable des forêts. Ensemble, garantissons l'efficacité, l'inclusivité et la durabilité des mesures prises pour lutter contre le changement climatique et la perte de biodiversité. Une planète en bonne santé pour notre prospérité à tous.
So we're ready in 2 minutes. We just need one more speaker and we'll be ready to go. So while we're waiting, I think I will just give you a few housekeeping announcements so you understand what you're saying yes to by being in this room. This event is recorded and it's live streamed. We realize that there are perhaps 7 events going on at this time here at the compound, and it's a little bit of a pity not to allow others to benefit from the interesting discussions we're hopefully going to have. So we are live streaming on YouTube, and we will record and make the recording available, just so you know. I also should let you know that compared to what is announced in the app, a few things have changed because some people were not able to travel or decided not to travel for reducing their emissions. So they will be participating online. We have 2 guests waiting in the lobby to take part online. And finally, we are very keen to make this an interactive session. And so we will have not as many speakers as we could have, really to allow time. So I'm in particular, since he has been sort of waiting for us a little bit. So give me 2 more minutes and we'll be ready to start this side event on CITES and forests, linking sustainable forest governance to climate change mitigation while supporting livelihoods. We'll be back in. Okay, so let's get going because many people have many other things to do, and we don't want to keep you waiting, all of you who were on time. So thanks again for being here, and I'd like to just give you sort of a little bit of a sense of what this is going to be about. As you know, you have experienced during the last couple of days, this UNEA is all about bringing the issues together, seeking synergies, and addressing this triple planetary crisis. And this is what this event is about as well. We are about to explore further together how sustainable forest management and how this links to climate change, and how by improving sustainable forest management we may also contribute to addressing the climate change challenge. I'd like to call on the panelists to come to the podium. First of all, Her Excellency Minister Steffi Lemke, who is the Federal Environment Minister of Germany. Welcome to the podium. Ms. Lemke, if you would like to join me up here. And I'd also like to invite Secretary General of CITES, Ms. Yvonne Higuero. Please join me up here. And finally, I'd like to invite Dechen Zering, who is the director of the newly established Climate Change Division in UNEP. Please come up here and join me. Thank you. And as I said, we have two more speakers. They are on the Zoom link, and we will introduce them as we get to their point on the agenda. So I can also now invite His Excellency Dr. Isakiak Adekunle Salako, Minister of State for Environment from Nigeria. Dr. Salako, would you like to join us at the podium right away? Please. Thank you. As our first speaker, I'm delighted to pass the floor again to Ms. Steffi Lemke, Environment Minister of Germany, and I'd like to say that the support of the German government to CITES in general and to the CITES Tree Species Project in particular highlight the commitment of the German government to global environmental governance and the support to the biodiversity climate nexus through partnership. Excellency, it's an honor.
Thank you. Thank you for introduction, and good morning to all of you. Secretary General Yvonne Higuera and Executive Director Shim Sadhguru. When we talk about species conservation, most people's first thought would be iconic animals like elephants and giraffes. But biodiversity in forests and the large number of lesser-known species found there are also vital to human survival. We need forests for food and medicine, as a source of income and as a carbon sinks. Fungi, plants and animals, forests are home to a wealth of biodiversity. And forests are in a drastic state. Between 2010 and 2020, more than 4.5 million hectares of forests were cleared every year. And the state of many forests declined in this period too. We humans are responsible for this. We are overexploiting forests and their resources, like wood. Pressure is also increasing around the world because of illegal harvesting and trade in timber in addition to legal trade. We are cutting down forests to use the land for agriculture, infrastructure, and mining. Forests are also feeling the impacts of the climate crisis. Forest fires are being reported almost every day. And long periods of drought with no rain are causing lasting harm. Forests show that biodiversity loss and the climate crisis are mutually reinforcing. This is why we have to tackle both problems together. Forest conservation is also climate change mitigation. Healthy forests store large amounts of carbon, and climate change mitigation generally helps species and ecosystems too, because they need a stable climate. An approach that tackles the environmental crises together is also something we should drive forward in the framework of international environmental agreements. These agreements can highlight synergies and develop cross-sectoral solutions. This is what today's event is about too. In Germany, we have applied this approach in our action plan on nature-based solutions for climate and biodiversity. The goal of our plan is to make ecosystems strong and healthy so they can be effective in climate change mitigation. This includes making forests more climate resilient. Near natural forests are the key here. For Germany, this means moving away from monocultures to mixed forests. Near natural forests are better at storing carbon and water and are more resilient to heat and drought. But it is not enough for every country to take action nationally. Global crises require global solutions. This is why my ministry remains a strong partner in international species protection and climate change mitigation. I would like to give you 3 examples. First, we are advocating the restoration and degraded forests at international level. We launched the Bond Challenge over a decade ago. Participating countries commit to restoring forest landscapes. My ministry is also very committed to promoting and shaping the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. The decade supports world restoration flagships on the restoration and sustainable use of ecosystems. Their aim is to show that restoration can help tackle the climate crisis and biodiversity loss and can also benefit local communities and indigenous people. Second, with the EU, we are working intensively on reducing our own share in global deforestation. Our domestic consumption should not lead to the destruction of nature in producer countries. We have adopted the EU regulation on deforestation-free products. In future, timber and agricultural commodities that are drivers of deforestation will only be allowed on the EU market if there is proof that they were produced sustainably. These products are only permitted if they come from areas that have been deforestation-free since 2020. Third, CITES. CITES is a powerful tool for limiting international trade in protected tree species to a sustainable level. CITES now lists 800 tree species. It requires all international trade in listed tree species to be legal, sustainable, and traceable. Our job as partners to CITES is to make this a reality. The CITES Tree Species Project is an important element. I'm delighted that my ministry is supporting this with 10 million euros, securing it for the years ahead. The projects help the parties involved to improve implementation of the CITES Convention for tree species used for timber. For example, it supports verifying legality and sustainability and drawing up management plans for certain tree species or regions. This will have overall positive impacts on forest habitats in the participating countries. and it will make a key contribution to climate change mitigation. I truly believe that this type of cross-sectoral project will shape the future. They protect the climate and biodiversity. They have a lasting impact. And if they are done well, local communities profit too. Let us continue working together on these solutions. Thank you for your kind attention.
Ministers, thank you so much for this powerful statement. It really brings home this point that we can only tackle climate change, climate crisis if we protect nature, and we can only save nature if we combat climate change. So thank you very much for your kind contribution and your keynote statement here. It's now my privilege to hand over to Ms. Yvonne Higuero, CITES Secretary General, who will give us a few more points on how CITES works. Ms. Higuero, you have the floor.
Your Excellency, Mrs. Steffi Lemke, Minister of the Environment, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety of Germany, Ms. Shem Sadhguru, Executive Director of the International Tropical Timber Organization, who is joining us online today, Ms. Dechen Schering, Acting Director, UNEP Climate Change Division, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, good morning, and thank you for joining us in this very important side event, as I see it as bringing to everybody's mind how we can how we can work together as we linked, how we can address the three planetary crises that we are working on urgently. And I thank you, Excellency, for your keynote highlighting the importance of linking how we address this triple planetary crisis, and also for the generous contribution of 10 million euros that you have made for the CITES Tree Species Project. And I'll speak a little bit more about that later. But I do think that this event will help us see how we can help the CITES parties meet their obligations under the CITES Convention, but we can see how also the parties can meet their obligations under UNFCCC, all at the same time contributing to sustainable forest management. I am also grateful to all present and those speaking today who are committed to make sure that we are all understanding these connections. A little bit about CITES, because it has a critical role in the international trade of wildlife, and the ultimate goal is to ensure the survival of wildlife in nature. You may not be aware that in the last decade, however, it now has turned not only from the species who are threatened by some trade, but now threatened by large trade and overexploitation of, for example, trees and marine species. As the minister explained, since the last COP in 2022, we now have almost 800 species of trees in the CITES appendices, and a great number of these which are highly economically valuable timber species, such as rosewoods. CITES also addresses the challenge of illegal and unsustainable harvesting of trade in tree species and is strongly engaged in combating illegal and harmful practices. So I am here and very delighted to be able to present this new project funded by the German government through the International Climate Initiative, again, linking climate and biodiversity. And this is a continuation of a previous project we had called the CITES Tree Species Project, and now we include about forest governance in this new one. So it's about sustainable tree trade, but also better forest governance. And again, thanks to Germany, and I really sincerely appreciate your vision, your leadership in funding this project. The project's aim is to further strengthen CITES implementation to reduce unsustainable and illegal logging, while supporting livelihoods and economic development in the range states. And this is also an important aim of CITES, that it is to ensure that trade is sustainable, legal, and traceable, because many countries depend on this for livelihoods. The minister also addressed the issue of local communities, how they are affected by unsustainability in trade, and also by climate change. We also wish to improve forest governance because all of this will contribute to climate action at the national and regional levels. A little bit about CITES, about what conditions must be fulfilled to be able to trade by an exporting country in CITES listed species. The proposed export must be sustainable, which means that an officially designated scientific authority must have made a so-called non-detriment finding, confirming that the trade will not put in peril the survival of the species for future generations. And here again, this is really a foundation of CITES which is based on scientific evidence. That scientific evidence has to show that the trade, it could be through a quota, through an estimation of the population status, to be able to say only this much can be traded, if at all. I would also like to recognize the contribution of the German government to our work on non-detriment findings. We just recently here in December had a meeting, a global meeting, working especially on these new tree species that have been added to the appendices, both the tree species and the marine species, to be able to build capacity in the range states to be able to perform, to carry out these non-detriment findings that are essential. The export must be legal. This is where we come to look into the legal acquisition findings that must be carried out. Illegally logged timber cannot be authorized for trade. There has to be a look across the value chain where these trees have come from. We also have to have in place a reliable traceability system to be able to know from the moment that that tree was felled until the moment of export and even to the moment of import. And these are the places in which this project are going to be supporting the parties to be able to carry out better and more trusting non-detriment findings, the same with the legal acquisition findings and possibly traceability systems. Some countries have not been able to do even population studies about the status of the tree species in the wild. So these are all the contributions that we will be making to support the parties. And because many of the parties right now are in compliance, under compliance mechanisms, because if a party or several parties are not able to document the sustainability and legality of the trade, the CITES Standing Committee may decide to completely suspend trade until the necessary findings have been made. As an example, in 2022, the committee decided to suspend all trade in African rosewood or Pterocarpus erinaceus because the range states were not able to produce non-detriment finding or a legal acquisition finding to be able to continue the trade. And I would like to bring, this is for 13 range states in West and Central Africa, and I would like to bring to your attention the presence here of the Minister of Environment of Sierra Leone, who has diligently, since this happened in 2022, has diligently worked to be able to produce the non-detriment finding and the legal acquisition findings to be able to export again Pterocarpus erinaceus. So these projects do work. We are supporting the countries to ensure that their trade is sustainable and legal and traceable. So congratulations to Sierra Leone for having done such an enormous work in such a short period of time. Finally, some of the range states participating in the previous phase of the CTSP have told us that the implementation of CITES has contributing to improving the forest management in general and not only related to the CITES listed species. We had in the evaluation that was done of the first phase of the project, there were more than 80 outcomes from all of the beneficiary countries working under the project. Even discovery of new species in Guatemala came out of this project. So they really have felt that this has helped them to meet their obligations under the convention, and many were not able to participate in the first phase. So this contribution from Germany is going to help many other countries who are not in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America to be able to participate in this project or continue some of the activities that they needed to continue to be able to finish the work on the tree species. So on the occasion of this side event, we have invited authorities and global leaders in the areas of climate change, timber trade, and environmental conservation, as well as representatives of CITES parties that consider conservation of forests and tree species as an important part of their biodiversity and climate change strategies, so that we may receive guidance as to how we can maximize the impact from initiatives such as the CITES Tree Species Project. I would also like us in this meeting to consider how CITES Tree Species, the CITES Tree Species Project can better serve as a successful example of fostering synergy, something that we've been talking about in these 2 last days of MEA days, how we can foster synergies between the MEAs, between the multilateral environmental agreements, and highlighting successful cross-fertilization efforts between the biodiversity and climate change pillars. Thank you very much.
Secretary General, thank you very much, and for bringing also home the point that this is about working together, which we've been talking about over the past few days, as I said, but here we're actually doing it in practice. We're actually trying to make a difference with this CTSP. And as I said in the beginning, I've been managing the CTSP for a little while in my previous position, and it has been a very true pleasure to be witnessing all these sort of resources that have been built in many of the countries. We have a representative from the Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania project who's here, who can speak a little bit about it, and hopefully we'll be able to build on this in the next phase. So now we're moving our attention away from CITES and towards climate change. I'm delighted to invite Ms. Detchen Zering as our next speaker. As I said before, Ms. Zering is the director of the newly established Climate Change Division at UNEP, and her insights will shed some light on this nexus climate change forest governance. Please.
Distinguished ministers, honorable speakers, a very good morning to you all. This side event highlights a debate how nature-based solutions such as forests are essential in mitigating the impacts of climate change. At no previous point has a call for action against climate change and biodiversity loss been more critical. We're now looking at the third generation of the nationally determined contributions that has to be done in really early 2025. And the UNEP emission gap report, the adaptation gap report, the production gap report has shown us that the pathway to 1.5 degrees really is closing. So forest and nature-based solutions are critical in our fight against climate change, and they're really essential. They represent, forests and nature-based solutions represent about 30% of the solution, and forests can have the potential to reduce emissions by approximately 4 gigatons per year. So we now know that to fulfill the targets of the Paris Agreement, are nationally determined contributions, and we are looking forward to more ambitious nationally determined contributions, the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework. We have to increase investments in these natural solutions. So let me start by stating the obvious: science and data, the bedrock of effective climate policies. But we are going to need global, multilateral actions and partnerships if we can truly scale our impact. The issues we confront are intertwined, demanding solutions, and they're going to need integrated, not fragmented solutions. So we are encouraging collaboration across sectors like forestry, agriculture, fisheries, integrating these with wildlife conservation for more effective climate action and biodiversity protection. Equally important is the recognition of the invaluable knowledge and traditional practices of indigenous peoples and local communities. Their profound connection with the planet's forests and biodiversity is fundamental in our strategies for climate change. At UNEP, we are committed to partnering with these communities, ensuring their knowledge informs our initiatives, building their capacity, and ensuring equitable share of benefits. If I can share a recent UN-led initiative in the Lower Mekong, a collaborative effort with CITES, this initiative paved the way for countries to develop sustainable forest trade pathways, assisting countries like Laos, PDR in managing the inventories of endangered tree species, such as rosewood. What sets this initiative apart is that we focused on the underlying behavioral drivers of rosewood depletion, such as high demand from specific countries. And so together with partners, foundations, a plethora of civil society youth organizations, we ran a behavioral change campaign called Forest for Life, designed to encourage sustainable purchasing habits. The effort has benefited from bilateral, multilateral dialogues to address other factors contributing to illegal logging in the Lower Mekong. Such strategic measures are crucial not only to encourage a behavioral shift towards conservation, but to highlight the interconnectedness between climate and biodiversity. When we target the drivers of illegal logging, the initiative contributed to protecting forests, enhancing carbon sequestration, and ultimately supporting the fight against climate change while safeguarding biodiversity. In this regard, allow me to mention the new CITES tree species project funded by Germany and the EU, which is being introduced at the side event. This project is a welcome development because it showcases science-based decision-making that affects both trade, climate policies, promotes cross-sectoral collaboration among forests, conservation, and the climate sector. I'm hopeful that this project will highlight the symbiotic relationship of these global challenges and the sustainable management of forest resources as a crucial element of a fight to address climate change. So if I may summarize, let me emphasize 3 points. First, the urgency for multi-sectoral action that breaks down silos is paramount. We need to integrate diverse perspectives, sectors, scientific insights, local knowledge in every aspect of the project implementation, especially those that relate to climate action, life on land, and global partnerships. Second, we have to confront the substantial financial gap in our climate and biodiversity initiatives. We have to dramatically increase investment in nature-based solutions and to ensure that climate finance enables developing countries to adopt climate-resilient pathways. And lastly, the recognition of the potential of forests and nature-based solutions to mitigate climate change. Unlocking this potential requires science-based approaches, behavioral interventions, concerted efforts to protect and restore these assets. By safeguarding the world's forests, we can reap benefits for both climate and biodiversity and forge a more sustainable future for all. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. As I said in the beginning, I am determined that we will have time for a little bit of a discussion, so I invite panelists to stay with us, if at all possible. And so I like your point about the urgency of multi-sectoral action in every sense and every aspect, so which to us means bringing in the private sector and bringing in the communities, but also bringing in the other international organizations that are focusing on timber and forest governance. So I would now like to introduce our first online speaker. I'm hopeful that she will be popping up on the screen here. Ms. Shame Satukuru, who is the Executive Director of the International Tropical Timber Organization, also known as ITTO. Can we have Ms. Satukuru on the screen, please? She has been waiting patiently from Yokohama, where she's based at the ITTO headquarters. I'm confident she can hear what I say, so I will invite Ms. Sakuru to guide us through some of the frameworks and strategies that are essential for the conservation and sustainable management of forests. And as I said, she decided to save on emissions and stay in Yokohama. Ms. Sakuru, please, the virtual floor is yours. I hope we can hear you.
Thank you so very much, Madam Marita. I hope you can hear me. I'm not sure if you can see me. Please indicate.
We can hear and see you perfectly well. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so very much. Now, Honorable Minister Steffi Lemke, Federal Minister for the Environment from Germany, Honorable Madam Secretary General of CITES, Madam Director from UNEP, congratulations on the PISA of the Climate Change Division at UNEP. Madam Director Hearing, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen. I hail from the ITTO and greetings from Yokohama today, and I've been asked to speak a little bit on how the ITTO and CITES have been collaborating with the main aim of trying to ensure the legality and sustainability of CITES listed species in the global international trade. Now, if we could just try to share our screen with you, I would like to take you through some of our slides and joint work that we have conducted. Please bear with us. Here we go.
We were not prepared for slides. I'm sorry.
I see. Okay, that's fine. I can just talk you through it then. But we do have a PowerPoint presentation, and we can always email it and send it to you afterwards if that of you may already know who the International Tropical Timber Organization is, and for those of you who don't, we promote the sustainable management and conservation of tropical forests, and we also promote the expansion and diversification of trade in tropical wood from sustainably managed and legally housed forests. The ITTO is the sole intergovernmental organization focused entirely on global tropical forest resources, and we are the only one also with the mandate on global tropical wood trade. So in other words, we can be seen as a multilateral tropical forest conservation and trade multilateral agreement. We consist of 76 members, almost a 50-50 proportion of 37 producers and 39 consumers. We cover 80% of global tropical forests, and we account for 90% of the trade in tropical forest products globally. We are governed by the International Tropical Timber Agreement, 2006, which came out of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. Now, the evolution of sustainable forest management and the ITTO guidelines have spanned a period of 34 years. The organization, of course, was established in 1986, but our work on guidelines and criteria indicators was first stamped in the year 1990. We are now in the year 2024. During this period, we have done guidelines for sustainable management of natural forests, of planted forests, guidelines for conservation of biodiversity in production forests, first in 1993, updated in 2008, sorry. Our first set of guidelines on forest fire management was introduced in 1998. We have environmental and social management guidelines introduced in 2020. We have gender guidelines that was produced in 2018. Guidelines for forest landscape restoration in the tropics 2020. We also have guidelines for the management of secondary tropical forests, tropical forest restoration, and the rehabilitation of degraded forest lands. And the most recent, of course, was the ITTO criteria and indicators, which spanned from 1992, 1998, 2005, and last revised in 2016. So this shows the commitment and the involvement of ITTO in helping its members implement sustainable forest management across the 3 tropical regions in Latin America, Africa, and also Asia. Next, please. Now, we also have the latest guidelines which is tropical forest landscape restoration, and this, of course, involves a multi-stakeholder consultation process and was produced in collaboration with C4ICRA, with IUFRO, and with many other stakeholders. And it actually shows the interdependence between principles and guiding items. We are, of course, now seeking support to implement these guidelines on landscape restoration in the tropics, and we are in conversations with quite a few external parties, and we are hoping that there will be a multilateral donor who will be interested in helping the implementation of this. Next. We have done long-standing work, of course, on market access, traceability, certification, legality verification, legality assessment, etc., etc. So I could not agree more with what was highlighted in the 2 keynotes by the Honourable Minister and the Honourable Sajjan, and also touched upon by Director Shirley. We very much appreciate the urgency in trying to implement as much as possible in order to ensure that either CITES listed species and or non-CITES listed species, in other words, those that are free to be traded in, must be harvested legally and traded legally and sustainably. ITTO has produced several tropical reports over the years, which encompasses not just the trade issues, but it also looks at international timber markets, the assessment of major developments in terms of technical and environmental standards, procurement policies, the development of forest certification, legality verification, the impact of timber procurement policies on the trade between tropical and also non-tropical, and the analysis of global trends impacting on the relative competitiveness of wood products, tropical and non, of course focusing more on tropical wood products. The updates on these issues are usually conveyed to our annual council ITTO. We have had a wonderful, long-standing collaboration over this period of time, and the earliest we started working together was since the 1990s. That's a long time ago. Of course, some of us have aged considerably since then, but there is much hope for the youth and for the younger people who are coming on board to take all our good work forward and actually enhance that work. You see, between the ITTC, which is the ITTO's council, and the CITES governing boards, they have issued several governing decisions calling for increased and enhanced collaboration and cooperation. So between 2005 and 2006, both organizations collaborated to develop a very large capacity building project, which resulted in the phase 1 of the ITTO CITES program, spanning between 2007 and 2010. This, of course, graduated, and we happily took it into phase 2, which was developed in 2011, commencing work in 2012, and completed in 2016. Of course, all these efforts then took both organizations towards the implementation of the CITES Tree Species Program between 2017 and 2022. And I couldn't say how much both organizations very much worked hard and enjoyed working together in the implementation of the CITES Tree Species Program. What came out of this Tree Species Program, of course, was the design of targeted resource inventory, the implementation and development of improved management plans. We undertook case studies and developed guidelines for and fed these into the national detrimental findings, which also included establishing export quotas. Additionally, we developed cost-effective regulatory systems for endangered and/or threatened tree species in terms of tracking, traceability, and we helped to also execute CITES training workshops. And all of the above are aimed at strengthened forest governance and the implementation of both the CITES Convention and the ITTA 2006. All of this, of course, addresses several points in the keynotes that have already been presented. Now, the projects that were carried out by category are, let me see, for MDS there were 50 projects actually. Under identification, 12 projects in total. For enforcement and compliance, 7. And for traceability and market transparency, 9. So that's quite a number of projects that were implemented on the ground. Under the tree species from 2017 to 2022, of course, we assessed project proposals for consideration of funding. There was a study on trade patterns and routes of CITES tree species in Asia. We organized regional meetings in Asia, Africa, Central and South America, and the Caribbean. We produced a study on agro-wood-producing species, including the cultivation and inoculation technologies and pest management practices. Workshops were convened on the agro-wood report for review and validation, published in English, French, and Spanish, and ITTO also participates and supports the advisory committee. One of the projects that was implemented relates to mahogany in Ecuador. All these reports are completely available on the ITTO website. In addition to what we did with CITES, ITTO also implemented some independent projects with donor funding from ITTO donors. One was in Madagascar to support the implementation of a youth plan act on monitoring and tracking of rosewood and stockpiles of rosewood. The second one was in Cameroon, where we are in collaboration with the University of Adelaide on DNA tracking and verification tests in supply chains of Purus africana and Pericops tilapia. And one more in Peru, in collaboration with the University of Adelaide on DNA verification of Ipe in Kumaro, which were listed at the CITES COP19 in 2022. Lastly, for considerations for future cooperation. Now, we've already heard, and I think most of us are aware, that more than 250 African species have recently been added to the CITES listing. Now, this calls for an urgency in trying to assist our member countries in Africa on how to deal with this. It will involve a substantive amount of work, and we are committed, of course, to helping and assisting and collaborating with CITES and our member countries. We also recognize that there is a continued high demand for valuable species that are part of these plus 250 species. Now, the possible core areas of work to enhance the implementation of of the conventional resolutions and decisions for CITES created species, of course, is firstly, governance and regulation of trade controls and monitoring, and secondly, the sustainability of free species trade, and thirdly, the identification, traceability, and markings of species that are created. We are also seeking donor funds to ITTO through the ITTO biannual work program to provide support to our countries for implementing CITES listings of tropical free species. In closing, I cannot enhance more that forests, when sustainably managed, are the most effective global carbon sink and sequester for carbon emissions. The use and trade in sustainably harvested wood and non-wood forest products are one of the most excellent nature-based solutions contributing to most of the SDGs, as they also provide perpetual carbon storage for the lifespan of those wood products that are being used. With that, I thank you for the privilege and opportunity of being part of this distinguished panel, and I will close my presentation. Thank you so much for being a wonderful host.
Ms. Sakouros, thank you so much, and also for explaining a little bit more about our collaboration going back to the 90s. Yeah, I have had the pleasure to work with some of your colleagues and participating in some of the workshops we've done together, and it's been a real pleasure, and I hope we can find a way to continue this collaboration along some of the lines you have outlined. Please stay on the line, because we will get to some question and answers after our next speaker, so hopefully you will be with us for a little while more. Our next speaker is His Excellency Dr. Isiaq Ndukulu Salako, Minister of State for the Environment in Nigeria. Mr. Salako, can you give us some highlights of the sustainable forest policy of Nigeria? And is it possible to give some example of how this contributes to climate change and livelihoods of the rural communities? Mr. Salako, Excellency, it's a pleasure. Please.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, let me congratulate my brother, the Minister of Environment from Sierra Leone, for your wonderful achievements. It is an honor to address this esteemed assembly on behalf of the Nigerian government regarding our nation's commitment to sustainable forest management and its pivotal role in advancing global environmental objectives, including mitigating and adapting to climate change. Let me also say that Nigeria attached a lot of importance to this event, and that is why I'm here with a very powerful delegation. Permit me to introduce who I call the head of our environmental police. The Director General of NESRA is here. The DG Forest Research Institute of Nigeria, and also the Conservator General for Nigeria. This is to underscore the importance that we attach to this event and to sustainable forest management. It's also important to say that under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the President of Nigeria, Nigeria is taking nature conservation, including protection of endangered species, very seriously. A few months ago, Nigeria destroyed some 6 pangolin scales and elephant ivory that is valued at about 30 million USD in the open market. And this is to send a very clear, unambiguous message of zero tolerance to illegal wildlife trade in Nigeria. For the economic development and livelihoods of indigenous people and local communities, our sustainable forest policies is anchored on principles of conservation, restoration, and sustainable utilization. So some of the key highlights include promotion of community-based forest management initiatives, implementation of deforestation and afforestation programs, and I want to say that apart from the Great Green Wall that Nigeria is participating very actively, In this 2024 budget of Nigeria, we have a special presidential initiative for climate adaptation and mitigation, and a substantial part of it is going to be for urban greening and also raising green infrastructure, afforestation generally. We are strengthening law enforcement mechanisms to combat illegal logging and deforestation, integration of indigenous knowledge systems in forest management practices, collaboration with international partners like ITTO and CITES to enhance technical capacities and knowledge exchange. Nigeria boasts of a rich biodiversity forest resources, including valuable timber species, medicinal plants, and non-timber forest products. Our sustainable forest management practices are not only geared towards conservation, but also towards fostering responsible trade and economic development. Key contributions from Nigeria include facilitating sustainable harvesting practices to ensure the long-term viability of forest resources, implementation of certification schemes to guarantee the legality and sustainability of timber products, promotion of value addition and downstream processing industries to minimize the economic benefit to maximize the economic benefit derived from forest products, and engagement with global markets to promote the trade of sustainable sourced forest products adhering to international standards and agreements. Central to Nigerian forest policy is the recognition of the integral link between sustainable forest governance and the well-being of rural communities. Our efforts are aimed at empowering local populations to become stewards of their forests while improving their socio-economic conditions. Such initiatives include support for community forest management institutions, enabling local communities to participate in decision-making processes and benefit-sharing mechanisms, implementation of agroforestry and sustainable land management practices to enhance food security and resilience to climate change, provision of alternative livelihoods opportunities such as ecotourism and non-timber forest products to reduce dependence on unsustainable forest exploitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this engaging intervention. I was very pleased to have you here, and good to hear that you are already linking this climate adaptation mitigation with forest management. So thank you so much. I also heard you talking about certification schemes, and maybe we can come back to this. Now we come to this situation where everything is a little bit in flux because the representative of Madagascar had signed up to be here. He's the Secretary General of the Environment Ministry for Madagascar. Unfortunately, he is right now delivering the national statement over at the UNEA, so we'd have to give that priority. So he's trying to join us later, but if not, I'm afraid we'll have to do without Madagascar in this event. So, as I said, I'd like to perhaps open the floor now for a few comments and questions, if you have, before we move to the next round of two speakers that we have left. I see someone here. Please, maybe you want to introduce yourself. No, just stay here. We just need the microphone.
Ladies and gentlemen, Torsten Arndt, Head of Advocacy from PFC International, the world's largest forest certification system. While our challenges are global, the solutions are local, because it is the people who safeguard and protect our forests. It is the people who manage our forests sustainably. It is the people who harvest trees, sometimes sustainably, sometimes legally, and sometimes illegally. If they do so illegally, often they don't do it because they are bad people or ignorant people, but because they need to sustain their livelihoods. What can be done? How can we bring our good intentions down to the people? Could we, for example, think of working with forest managers so that they work with surrounding communities to build their capacity about the importance of endangered species? Could those forest managers offer more in terms of ensuring the livelihoods of surrounding communities? Could we bring those people together to define what is needed in particular areas so that it actually works for the people? Could we have those dialogues then also at national level, recognizing that each country operates in different environments? Yes, we can. PFC is doing exactly that. We are working through multi-stakeholder dialogues at national level. We require forest managers to consult and communicate with local people. We offer a forest governance structure with our jurisdictional approach to certification, which allows sometimes thousands of smallholders to come together, to manage forests together, to build their capacity together. We are offering a compliance verification mechanism with traceability attached to it. So solutions are out there. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the key terms of this UNEA, from my point of view, is collaboration. PFC as an organization is collaborative. We engage in all of these multi-stakeholder dialogues. But let me ask you a question. Do we all do enough? My answer for my organization is definitely not. Yvonne and I have been knowing each other for about 10, 15 years. Have we talked about how forest certification can better serve CITES in the protection of endangered species? We haven't. Something we will do hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Have we talked to Nigeria about whether it's possible to set up a national standard in Nigeria so that we can help you protect your forests better? We haven't. There are lots of others here where I think collaboration would bring us forward. We all need to collaborate with each other, but also with organizations that work at the local level. Only this will safeguard our forests. I'm admitting we haven't done enough. I encourage you to think closely whether there's more that you can do. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this comment. I wonder if there are more questions, comments. I see one over here and one in the back, and then the minister from Sierra Leone will give you the floor right after this speaker, please.
Thank you. Oh, there we go. Thank you very much. My name is Will Travers. I'm from the Born Free Foundation. I had one very brief comment and two fairly brief questions. The comment is just this. I've only been here at UNEA for a day and a half, and of course I hear the words nature-based solutions all the time, and we all have. And I just want to suggest that we are careful when we use the words nature-based solutions, because they sound very nature-friendly, but may actually be used to describe practices that are far from friendly to biodiversity. But to my questions, the first one is about NDFs, and I wanted to direct it to Yvonne, our Secretary General. I know it's a difficult subject, but can the details of how an NDF is carried out, what data it's based on, including the raw data, how the analysis is conducted, and how the conclusions are arrived at, can that be made public to assist in building the confidence of all stakeholders, including an increasingly concerned general public, confidence in the process, and offer the opportunity for independent evaluation? And perhaps it's easier if I just do my second question as well. This one is to the minister who has had to leave. Well, I'll ask the question anyway. The use of trees from managed forest may have a lower potential impact on biodiversity. But as the minister herself said, she preferred near natural forests and, of course, natural forests. I would like to understand what evidence is gathered about the impact of the extraction of a single commercially valuable tree species, which, as the image behind you suggests, can be highly disruptive on the impact on localized biodiversity, other plant species, fungi, invertebrates, fish, reptiles, birds, mammals, and what biodiversity loss mitigation strategies sit within the sustainable forest governance plans that exist or are being developed.
Thank
very
you.
much.
In order to allow as many of you to take the floor, I invite you to be as concise and short as possible. This does not apply to the Minister of Sierra Leone. Of course, you have the floor, please.
Thank you.
You want to stand up, yeah.
Okay, so I'll start with some of our efforts, or our plans as a country, and then I have one or two questions about how we can form partnerships.
If it's more comfortable for you. It's more if you have your phone, so please.
Thank you. So for Sierra Leone, climate change and ecosystem protection are intertwined, primarily because our the assets that we have that we can utilize for mitigation are natural assets. So as a result, our country is in the process of planning a major ecosystem restoration program that is going to be rolled out nationally. Now, there are some challenges to doing that because the forests themselves provide services to the people of Sierra Leone, especially people living in the forests or around these forests. So any ecosystem restoration program has to factor in the economic activities of these communities, because at the end of the day, the forests are there to serve us. The first thing we're doing currently is a national forest inventory, so we can know which species are available across the country. And then obviously after that, if we can get funding, we can do a sort of a census, so we know the quantity of each species and where they are located. Now, this ecosystem restoration, we're looking at restoring these forests in their natural state. So, but at the same time, people need these, have been depending on these forests for fuel, which is one of the biggest sources of deforestation for cooking, and for timber. So the ecosystem restoration has to make provisions for that, because people still need to cook, they need to eat, and people need to have use timber for different economic activities. We're working on so we have multiple threads going on at the same time. Ecosystem restoration is a big part. There's climate legislation, because at the end of the day, as we're restoring the ecosystems, we want to monetize the ecosystem. And by monetizing it, you have resources which can go to these communities and have direct economic impact on their lives. And what that does is it transforms the relationship a bit, wherein they derive economic benefits from protecting the forests, in as much as they would get economic benefits from consuming the forests. But in doing so, you have woodlots for some of the consumption activities that they engage in. You can still protect the ecosystems while at the same time leaving these woodlots for firewood and for timber. When it comes to timber and the forest management, one of the things that we we realize, and we've always realized, but we're going to legislate this now, is timber products, especially rosewood, are intergenerational products. I mean, this generation has our custodians right now, but we don't own it. Like, we don't own the timber. Our children, our grandchildren, and future generations are also stakeholders in the timber exploitation. So it has to be sustained for future generations, and that's one of the things that we're working on. We've done an NDF, which we've submitted to CITES, which CITES is reviewing, and we'll work with CITES, because at the end of the day, it's in our interest as a country to be able to exploit this resource in a sustainable way. Lastly, and the reason is, exploitation of these forest resources has micro impact in these communities, and for countries that export the timber, it has macroeconomic impact. And the biggest macroeconomic impact is in getting foreign exchange, which helps to stabilize currencies. And when you remove that foreign exchange, then you have all sorts of macro impacts on the currency, which in countries like ours, which are small open economies, leads to inflation, and that impacts everyone in our society. So we're managing a few things here at the same time. It's not an easy task, but we're doing the best that we can. For those of you that are here who are interested, we'll be having a Climate and Forest Forum in June, our first forum. We are always open to partnerships, because at the end of the day, we think that different people have different technical expertise, and they can bring knowledge to the table which can benefit our country and our citizens. I would, have conversations with some of the people here who may be interested, and we can see how we can take this forward. Thank you very much.
Excellencies, thank you so much for these words. Very encouraging to hear what you're already doing in this area. So we had a few questions. I would like to call on Shame, if we can put her online, to talk a little bit about the second question from the gentleman over there on forest management plans and how they take into consideration other species. But the first question were addressed to the Secretary General, and perhaps you want to also comment on some of the other things that have been made. And if any of you would like to say something, you just let me know. Yeah. Please, Secretary General.
Thank you, and I think you can hear me, yes. I'll respond to the first question about the non-detriment findings, and which are carried out by the country for different species. As you've mentioned, there's a whole methodology that they can use to be able, they can choose their methodology, but it has to have certain requisites under the convention, and we have actually on our webpage a collection from all of the different countries for different species, the non-detriment findings that they have made. Now, it is not an obligation under the convention to have to submit those NDFs. It is between the importing and the exporting country, where the exporting country will have an NDF. The importing country will have to do their due diligence to ensure that they are satisfied with that NDF and that it is sustainable, the trade that is being carried out. But many, many, many parties are now putting online their non-detriment findings so it can be transparent and open for all to see. We will, under the non-detriment finding project that is also funded by Germany, the European Union, and Switzerland, there are going to be many case studies that are going to be produced of those non-detriment findings for different species, marine species, sharks. Mexico already has a shark NDF that they have uploaded on the website. There's going to be also for the timber species that have been uploaded on the website, and more to come. So they will all be, most of them will be visible, but again, as you know, it is not an obligation, but countries are wanting to be more transparent in any case about those non-detriment findings. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General. We have Shane back on the screen. Did you want to perhaps give some comments on the second question, please?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much for that question and for giving me the opportunity to answer this question. So for the gentleman from the Corn Free Foundation who asked the question, may I refer you to a joint initiative between the ITTO and the Convention on Biological Diversity, which completed its work in 2021. Now, this project was executed across 23 tropical countries, and it involved 16 projects in the 23 countries and involved a budget of about $13 million US. Now, an independent technical review, which is available on our website as a policy brief, found that these projects achieved extraordinary success in improving local livelihoods and forest management, restoring degraded forests, and conserving biodiversity. The review considered that the projects contributed to the main global processes with forest implications. In other words, the Aichi biodiversity targets, the SDGs, naturally, the global forest goals, and the objectives of the ITTO. We have renewed our MOU with the CBD now, and there are five main objectives, one of which, of course, is to assist in building countries' capacity to implement the ITTO and IUCN guidelines for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity in tropical producing forests and other relevant guidelines and CBD divisions. This, of course, is very closely linked to the global biodiversity framework that was recently agreed at the CBD, the Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework I'm talking about, that was recently agreed in Montreal, Canada. Now, when we talk about harvesting in a sustainably managed tropical forest, talking about natural forests, 1 hectare only allows the harvest of 3 to 4 trees, depending on the species and the growth cycle and the diameter, minimum diameter of the tree prior to being felled. This is why we have forestry guidelines and we have forestry regulations in most tropical countries. Harvesting is strictly regulated by these guidelines and forest regulations. Now, each compartment of forest, you see every forest management unit is a gazetted forest area, which is a protected forest area also within those countries, and each of these forest management units are then further subdivided into what we call forest compartments. The compartments are then rotated on a minimum 35-year cycle. So there is no risk of over-harvesting, and if one tree is taken out, reduced impact logging techniques are always applied. Sure, there will be minimal damage caused through reduced impact logging in the immediate vicinity of the tree that is being logged, and minimal destruction to the species that live around. So I hope those numbers give you some sense of how serious a business it is of implementing sustainable forest management, and governments and stakeholders are not free to remove trees from the forest at will.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for your comments. I think we need to move on to the last speaker we have online, because she's been waiting since 9:30, so I think we should give her a chance to speak. This is Madame Aurélie Flore Kumbabamba, sorry. And Flore is the rowing ambassador for in charge of climate change, environment, and sustainable development. If we can put her on the screen. She has been involved in CITES implementation of in the implementation of CITES in Gabon for many years. She's been a member of this scientific authority in Gabon. She's also serving as the current chair of the CITES Plants Committee, and she is also a co-facilitator of the Congo Basin Forest Partnership. And Flore had prepared to speak in French, but with some nice pressure from my side, she will make her remarks in English. So much, Flore, thank you so much. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to take part in this panel. with a distinguished speaker. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, please? Yeah, it's good? Okay. So, as you know, CITES was adopted in 1973 in response to the problem of unregulated international trade with invasive species. It's a powerful tool of international cooperation to fight against the illegal timber trade. Today, CITES regulates international trade in over 20,000 species of flora, including nearly 700 species. At the last CITES conference of the party in 2022, 150 new tree species were included in Appendix 2, including several African tree species. In 1975, there were only 90 tree species in the CITES appendices. So, in view of the increasing number of tree species listed in the CITES appendices, the efficient implementation of CITES is a great of importance, not only for the conservation and management of forest ecosystems, but also for livelihoods and socio-economic conditions. For the range states of the tree species, that means to implement CITES provision related to legal acquisition trade, non-detriment findings and possibility, including identification issues of tree species in international trade. Correct. So, with this environment conducive to compliance, enforcement, and trade monitoring CITES contributes to forest government. And new decision, the new CITES decision and on forest were adopted at the last COP to streamline the implementation of related provisions. I would like to thank the Secretariat for its assistance to parties, particularly those of the African region, in implementing the provisions of the Convention. For example, there is a platform on which identification resources and tools that was launched in 2022 and developed by the Secretariat in collaboration with FAO. It includes good identification resources in the form of manuals, identification gates and tools, and software, and also contact details of institutions or organizations and networks. There is also the CITES program from African trees that is important, and this program led to the development of non-detriment findings and export quotas based on inventories of the species, such as Prunus africana in Cameroon, Prunus africana and Pedicopsis elata in DRC, or Tibatindo in Gabon. The program also produced identification resources for the Pterocarpus species. This is a wonderful example of multilateralism in the legal state of timber wood species. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Flore, et merci d'avoir parlé en anglais. Ça nous a fait gagner un peu de temps. Thank you so much. Before we close, I would like to give the floor to a representative of the CTSP project in Kenya to just give us a little bit of a flavor of what the activities you were doing under this project, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, that you are still wrapping up, if I understand correctly. Please, you have a couple of minutes to just give us a little bit of a flavor. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this chance to give you a little bit of information and to share our experiences as one of the beneficiaries of the first cohort of projects under the CITES tree species. My name is Agnes Lusweti, and I'm here on behalf of my boss, Dr. Beatrice Hayota, who we both work at the National Museums of Kenya, who is also the Kenya's CITES authority. Now, a little story. Ours, with a focus on Osiris lanceolata, which is a medicinal and aromatic plant that grows in Africa, both east and it's widespread up to southern Africa, began as a curious observation on the border of Kenya and Tanzania. One day, the policemen arrested a vehicle carrying pieces of wood, and they said, "We are carrying firewood to Tanzania." And it was very strange because we thought if Tanzanians are not eating because they don't have firewood and they have to import from Kenya, then that is a very serious problem. So taking a closer look, we realized that this is a local species which the Maasai community uses as a medicinal plant, and it's a very a potent and very important tea for the local community. But what had happened was the normal sandalwood oil producing tree had gone into short supply in the traditional markets. And so a demand appeared on the international market, and it's not a small quantity that was required. They suddenly required sandalwood oil, not in small quantities, international proportions. And that landed the problem squarely in East African populations of Osiris, because it had been found that it can easily substitute the Santalum album oil. And they wanted it more for cosmetic industry, as we needed, the local communities here needed it for medicinal purposes. So suddenly the demand for this species increased. But it's not a plant that grows on its own, and it's not a plant that we had been tried as a domesticated plant species. They were sourcing it exclusively from the wild, but it landed us in CITES. So this species was listed during the CITES in Thailand. And Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania as source countries and parties to CITES had a conversation, and our populations were listed. So we started immediately to use this international framework to resolve a local problem. And eventually we have found ourselves addressing issues of community livelihoods. And now, as the Kenyan government has launched the 30 by 30, we want the country covered under tree cover by 2030, up to 30%, and that is a very tall order. While they are pushing all the tree species and into this program, we are busy pushing trees that are of economic importance, because they remain relevant to the communities, they remain relevant for trade, and they remain relevant for biodiversity conservation. As you all know, Kenya is a wild destination for wildlife tourism. So all these things are relevant to us, and by addressing this particular challenge, while we are pushing trees of economic significance, we are also busy reforesting the country. And there are a few things we learned, that it is important to talk to each other, government to government, institution to institution, local community to local communities. A lot of lessons have been moved from Kenya, local communities who are planting Osiris on their own, to Ugandan communities who are also privy to local populations of Osiris, and at the same time to Tanzania. And we were lucky because we had tools that could identify this species not as in normal scientific requirements where you provide a proper specimen. This was already a product, and we had been doing a project that could help us identify even mixtures in trade, mixtures of plant ingredients in trade. So we have pulled several tools from different institutions from different experiences in the past and lumped them all together as a region and deployed all of them. We have, in the process, improved the ability of Tanzania to do DNA work. The Ugandans have benefited from Kenya's ability to have domesticated this particular plant, and Kenya has also benefited from being able to work as a regional bloc of East Africa. So each of the 3 countries still needs to complete its own inventory for us to be able to do quota setting, because for a project that was that started in 2017 to 2022, the funding was a little bit too little, and this particular species is very widespread, so we have tested the tool, it works. But we also need to do a little bit more to be able to set even the quota for Osiris export from the region. Trade is still very rampant, and the modes of smuggling are becoming a little bit more sophisticated. You know, the black market changes tact every minute. If you start arresting the bigger lorries, they will change to smaller vehicles. If you arrest the small vehicles, they will even take a motorcycle. So, yeah, that trade is like that. So there's need for domestication programs and also capacity building to undertake the sharing of experiences. And yeah, I think that is all I can say for the little time I've been given. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Agnes, for making it over here this morning to give us this little story. It's a very good story and a very good project. So thank you for being with us this morning. So I still have no news from Madagascar, so I think we will wrap up the event now. We have a little video from our colleague in Laos, PDR, that was explaining how we worked under the UN RED project with funding from Norway in the lower Mekong region to further enhance their implementation of the convention in this region. And we will play the video at the end, so you can either stay and listen. She's explaining in 2 minutes how we work together on this project in this region, or you can leave. There is some catering outside, so you will be able to get some refreshments. So before we get to that, I'd like to hand over to the Secretary General for a few closing remarks about the next steps of the CTSP, perhaps. Please.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Sophie, for the excellent moderation. Really appreciate it, and thank you for participating in your questions and listening to what has been developing under the CTSP, but most importantly, being able to now hear more about these links between between climate change, between biodiversity, and how we can have co-benefits in the work that we do, where 1 + 1 adds up to more than 2 because of the impact that we can have by working together. And I can't deny that this is one of my favorite subjects to talk about, because I find that often, even though, of course, animals are so important, and especially these iconic species, it was also nice to hear from the minister talking about some of the species that we never talk about. I always say maybe they're not as cute as these iconic species, and when we talk about fungi, etc., but they're incredibly important to ecosystems. And now when we hear about medicinals and aromatics, as in the story from Kenya, we hear about the timber that is all of these types of species that are helping local communities and livelihoods. It helps us pay attention. Something like frankincense, for example, which now we're looking into, that is used by so many different religions in the world. It's some very interesting stories that are related to plants. And even when we visited Laos, I think the story will be about agro. Is it going to be about? Okay, more general, but when we visited Laos, we see the trees where the substance comes from that is used in perfumes, that without that substance, they wouldn't be able to make perfumes. It makes you understand the importance, again, not only for ecosystems, not only for species conservation, but also for livelihoods, communities, and also the economies of many countries. So we have to ensure that the trade is sustainable, legal, and traceable, and we're very much looking forward to working with you parties who may need to continue some of your projects, who may need to have new projects. We will soon be sending out a notification announcing the start, where we will be calling for proposals from you. So please, when you see the notification, if you have some concerns about sustainability of your timber species, about your medicinal aromatics, or in general about your CITES listed trees, please come back to us. And thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you. So I would like to recognize the fabulous technical team that make this go so smoothly. I don't know how you do it, but thank you so much. Thank you to all our speakers. Thank you to the speakers online. Thank you to all of you for being here. And as I said, there were refreshments outside. A little introduction to the video that we can play while you take your things. The speaker is Akiko Inoguchi from FAO, and she's based in Lao PDR, as I mentioned. And she shares in a very nice way how we work together and collaborated under the UN RED funded with money from Norway project over 2019-2022, which, as you all know, was a very complicated period for all of us. And we learned a lot about using online tools to collaborate. There was a lot of workshops we were supposed to have had in the region that we had to go online with. There were different tools that were developed, and we have now created a CITES and Forest web page on the CITES website where you can find these tools. I think our colleague Flo mentioned the identification tools and the institutions that can help identify timber tree species if you have doubts. There are lots of information now that we have collected under this project. So the message was recorded towards the end of the project and played in our COP in Panama at the end of 2022, where we celebrated all the outputs of the CTSP that the Secretary General also made reference to. So this was such a nice message. I thought it can be played again, and so you can take it away and see how interagency collaboration can actually work really well on the ground. So thank you all for being here. We'll put on the video and we'll have a coffee outside. Thanks again and have a good day.
Thank you for having me today. I'd like to share it's been a busy but very positive experience in the last few years, working with CITES Secretariat through our UNEP program initiative, as we call it. Personally, it's been a really long and big learning curve for myself. Started from one capstone acronyms of LAF, Equal Acquisition Findings, and NDM, non-document findings. It's also been hugely rewarding because I've been able to witness firsthand how countries have been able to concretely benefit from the project. The UNEP program, and specifically the Sustainable Forest Trade and the Leone Initiative. This is a program that's been running for the past 3 years, and we are mandated to work with the 5 countries of the Mekong, that is Cambodia, Nepal, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam. And ultimately, our mandate is to help these countries to reduce deforestation and forest degradation, and to contribute to the global agenda of climate change mitigation. The other is talking about this initiative right now. Our project has a focus on addressing forest crime, forest-related. And how do we do this? We do this through working on making the forest trade legal and sustainable. Legal and sustainable, I understand, are two the key words for the CITES crosses these two. So I mentioned the 2 acronyms already. These are the 2 acronyms that we have mentioned many times in our work together. So we have offered trainings on the legal acquisition and ensuring the legal basis of trade in the CITES species, as well as the NPF, ways to now. So come here for the viewers to booth and you know exactly what is happening. So I've experienced here, particularly with our government counterparts, and specifically they made huge endeavor to work on the findings for two species listed under and as a result, we're here to say that the government is taking a firm position not to have experts involved in need. This all happened with very close consultation and technical guidance we received from Isabel, Sophie, and colleagues at the Secretariat. I believe that this experience of working jointly with the CITES Secretariat, ourselves, the government, is testimony of partnerships that we can impact. I believe that I'm not alone in doing today. And what I want to just thank you, CITES Secretariat, for joining us and with us, and for taking a few minutes today to let me share our perspectives with you. Thank you.
Forests are the lungs of the earth and home to countless species essential for our survival. Among them, timber-producing, aromatic, and medicinal tree species are some of the world's most valuable wildlife commodities. However, the commercial allure of high-value trees has led to that overexploitation. Many CITES-listed trees face the threat of unsustainable and illicit harvesting and trade, jeopardizing both their survival and the balance of the ecosystem. Forest loss contributes to about 1/6 of annual greenhouse gas emissions, a major driver of climate change. The CITES Tree Species Project is funded by the European Union and Germany through the International Climate Initiative. The project pioneers a mission to curb deforestation and combat climate change through better management of forests. This initiative strengthens the capacities of countries to manage their forest resources sustainably, ensuring that international threatened species support rather than undermines conservation efforts. With a focus on legal acquisition and non-determinant findings, we ensure that CITES-listed trees are traded in a legal and sustainable manner, safeguarding our forests for future generations. By fostering strong connections between sustainable forest management and trade regulation, the project embodies the CITES commitment to bridge species conservation with sustainable forest governance. Together, we can ensure effective, inclusive, and sustainable actions to tackle climate change and biodiversity loss towards a healthy planet for the prosperity